Imagine this. You're sitting across from someone, sharing an idea that feels profound, something you've pieced together after hours of quiet contemplation. But instead of curiosity, you see a flicker of unease in their eyes, a subtle shift away. Have you ever noticed that the deeper you think, the more distant you feel from others? That the more you understand about the intricate, often uncomfortable workings of the world, the less people seem willing to listen? It's an unsettling paradox, isn't it? Why would the pursuit of clarity, of deeper meaning, create an invisible wall between you and the very society you inhabit? You're not imagining it. This chasm is real, etched into the fabric of human interaction. Society has always been wary of deep thinkers, not because they are wrong, but because they see what others refuse to acknowledge. Truths hidden beneath layers of comforting illusion. History proves this time and time again. From Socrates to Nietzsche, from Galileo to Tesla, brilliant minds have been ridiculed, silenced, or ignored. Not due to a lack of intelligence, but because their insights made people profoundly uncomfortable. Why does understanding isolate? Why does the light of reason often cast the longest shadows of loneliness? The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, one of history's most brutally honest observers of the human condition, once argued that intelligence itself is a curse, one that isolates those who see reality too clearly. But why does this happen? Why does society instinctively resist those who think differently? The answer lies deep within human psychology, tangled in the roots of our identity and survival instincts. Consider this. When you stand next to someone physically stronger, you don't necessarily feel weak. You might admire their strength. When you meet someone wealthier, you may feel envy, but you don't typically feel personally attacked. Their advantage is external, measurable, separate from the core of who you believe yourself to be. But encountering someone who is intellectually superior creates an entirely different reaction, a visceral discomfort. Psychologists call this the mirror effect. A deep thinker doesn't just present new ideas. They unintentionally hold up a mirror, highlighting the limitations, the unexamined assumptions, and the cognitive blind spots of those around them. And people rarely forgive that reflection. Intelligence, unlike physical strength or material wealth, is closely tied to our identity. We define ourselves by our thoughts, our beliefs, our understanding of the world. So, when we encounter someone who thinks on a deeper level, someone who questions what we take for granted, it can feel like a direct challenge to our very sense of self, an assault on the ego's carefully constructed reality. This perceived threat triggers a cascade of unseen consequences rooted in our deepest psychological defenses. Instead of admiring intelligence, many people instinctively resist it. Not because the deep thinker is arrogant or dismissive, often they say nothing at all, but because their very presence forces others to confront their own limitations, stirring feelings of inadequacy. The mere presence of someone who thinks on a deeper level acts as an uncomfortable reminder of what others haven't considered, or perhaps chosen not to consider. This isn't random. It's a psychological defense mechanism. When people encounter a deep thinker, their minds can shift into self-preservation mode. Instead of engaging, they dismiss. Instead of being curious, they resist. Modern neuroscience confirms this visceral reaction. Studies show that when individuals feel intellectually inferior, their brain's amygdala, the region responsible for processing fear and threats, becomes highly active. In simple terms, deep thinking doesn't just intimidate people. It triggers a primal survival response, similar to the feeling of facing real danger. Why does intelligence trigger the same fear response as a physical threat? The answer lies partly in the way human brains evolved. For most of history, survival wasn't primarily about being the smartest. It was about being accepted by the tribe. Our ancestors thrived where social harmony meant protection. To be cast out was to be vulnerable, and vulnerability often meant death. This is why the human brain instinctively prioritizes social acceptance, often over intellectual brilliance. When an exceptionally intelligent person enters a social setting, they unknowingly disrupt this ancient tribal balance. Their presence challenges long-held beliefs, established norms, and group dynamics. To the primitive parts of the human brain, this isn't just an intellectual shift, it's a perceived threat, triggering the same defensive response as a physical danger. Cognitive biases further entrench this resistance. The Dunning-Kruger effect leads those with limited knowledge to overestimate their competence, dismissing deeper insights. The status quo bias makes people prefer familiar, comfortable ideas over complex, challenging ones. The backfire effect means that when confronted with information challenging their beliefs, people often double down rather than reconsider. System justification. Theory makes people defend existing social structures, even when flawed, because change feels threatening. And the pervasive fear of social rejection, inherent in groupthink, keeps people aligned with widely accepted beliefs, stifling intellectual dissent, no matter how truthful it may be. So, what does this mean for deep thinkers navigating a world often resistant to their nature? Does this inherent friction condemn them to perpetual isolation? The rebellion against this societal pressure requires a radical shift in perspective. It begins with understanding the forces at play and then learning how to navigate them wisely, much like Schopenhauer himself advised. First, embrace solitude. Rather than viewing solitude as a punishment, see it as Schopenhauer did, a privilege. He believed intellectuals should use their alone time for creative and philosophical pursuits, finding validation within themselves rather than seeking it from a society unprepared to offer it. Solitude becomes the sanctuary where deep thought can flourish, unburdened by the need for external approval. Second, find like-minded individuals. Instead of conforming to the mainstream, Schopenhauer advised deep thinkers to seek out intellectual kin, whether through books that connect them across centuries, through engaging with philosophy, or by finding or creating exclusive circles of thought where genuine intellectual exchange is valued. You don't need millions of people to understand you, just the right ones. Third, engage with society wisely. Schopenhauer warned against sharing profound insights indiscriminately with those unprepared for them. Instead, he urged thinkers to observe the world, understand its patterns, and choose their words carefully. The challenge, as Einstein once suggested, is not just to think deeply, but to communicate depth with simplicity, bridging the gap without overwhelming others. History's greatest minds found ways to make deep ideas accessible, translating complexity into forms that could eventually resonate, even if initially resisted. Learn to gauge your audience, saving your most profound thoughts for those who can truly appreciate them, while finding ways to share insights more broadly without triggering defensive reactions. In the end, Schopenhauer's philosophy confirms what many deep thinkers already suspect. Society does not fear intelligence itself. It fears what intelligence reveals: the uncomfortable truths, the need for change, the challenge to established power structures, and comforting illusions. Deep thinkers aren't rejected because they are wrong. Often, they are rejected because they are right, but too soon. So, if you've ever felt alone in your thoughts, misunderstood for seeing the world differently, understand this: you are not broken. You simply see the world with a clarity that disturbs the comfortable slumber of the majority. This doesn't mean deep thinkers are doomed to isolation, but they must learn to navigate society wisely, recognizing the inherent resistance they face. The truth is, society isn't designed to embrace deep thinkers. It's designed for stability, predictability, and comfort. Most people prioritize these things over the often unsettling pursuit of truth. That's why shallow conversations, simple ideas, and repetitive, emotionally charged content dominate social spaces, especially in the digital age, where algorithms reward engagement over depth. While the majority may prefer light, surface-level interactions and comforting illusions, those who value truth over appearances often feel disconnected, unable to participate without a sense of boredom or alienation. Schopenhauer saw intelligence as a double-edged sword, a source of power and clarity, but also an instrument of suffering and isolation. It enables one to perceive reality more clearly, but in doing so, creates distance from those who prefer those comforting illusions. He believed ignorance, not wisdom, was the key to conventional happiness, which is why history's greatest thinkers often struggled with depression, existential dread, and social isolation. While intelligence may lead to loneliness, it also grants freedom, clarity, and a deeper understanding of life itself. The world may not always embrace deep thinkers, but it has always needed them. It is these individuals, willing to confront uncomfortable truths and challenge the status quo, who drive humanity forward. As Schopenhauer wrote, "Talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see." Deep thinkers will always make some people uncomfortable, but that should never be a reason to stop thinking deeply. Your path is necessary, even if it is often solitary.